Let's face it, business technology is frustrating and complex. So how do you make sure it works for your team? To make IT right, start the discussion at go-domain.com. You're listening to Discussions by Domain, a podcast for business leaders. Our discussions may be with people you've probably heard of before, but the majority of our guests are in the trenches, professionals like you and I, with the same challenges and struggles of keeping up in the Northeast. They're implementing strategies, overcoming hurdles. They're leading the fastest growing businesses in our region. My name is Anthony DeGraw, Director of Partnerships at Domain Computer Services, and the host of this show. When I'm not talking with business leaders, you'll hear stories from behind the scenes of Domain and the ups and downs of our own growth journey, as we intend to take over the world. Just kidding. Well, maybe. Let's get into the show. Welcome to Discussions by Domain. I am your host, Anthony DeGraw, and I am excited to announce our guest today, James Mottola. James is the Vice President of Data Privacy, Investigations, and Security at Porzio Compliance Services. Jim leverages his experience and expertise to counsel and advise clients on matters of information security, physical security, data protection, compliance, privacy, and incident response planning. Jim works with organizations to reduce the likelihood and financial impact of the theft of data and cyber crime. He holds various certifications in physical and information security and a Master's of Science in Management with a focus on organizational change. Jim, so happy to have you on the show today. What's going on?
Hey, I'm great to hear from you. Great to hear from you, and I'm really excited that you have all started this podcast. I just don't think there's enough really good podcasts out there for information security and data privacy, so I compliment you guys on getting this started.
I appreciate that. Thanks, Jim. So what we'll do is we'll start out by, if you could tell me a little bit more about yourself, your experience, and the exciting things you guys are doing over at Porzio Compliance Services.
Sure, you got it. So Porzio Compliance Services, or PCS, we're really I would say we're a business security and compliance solutions firm. We are helping our clients with a very complicated landscape of data privacy, information security, physical security, and threat assessments to kind of determine risks for those clients and come up with some strategies to mitigate those risks. So, oftentimes what we see as well is that we're in an incident response mode where something has gone awry, whether it's a cyber event or an insider threat. And we have been able to position ourselves as a trusted advisor to help our clients really pull together from our internal and external resources to solve a lot of these problems. And internally, we are part of the Porzio family of businesses, which encompasses Porzio Bromberger Newman, which is a law firm. We also have Porzio Life Sciences and Porzio Governmental Affairs. So between those businesses, we have a lot of very talented people. We often work with folks like yourself at Domain. Really, we consider our trusted, verified, relationships, because this is a very complicated landscape that we all work in, and it usually requires a lot of folks with different types of skill sets. So, we're able to leverage those relationships and help our clients, which are, for the most part, I would say we focus in the education space, nonprofit space, and work with a lot of privately held businesses.
Yeah, that's great. I always like to say that I think cybersecurity is one of those areas that's very confusing to a lot of people because you have to take in so many different industries to solve one problem. So it sounds like you guys are rounding out a couple of those different industries to help tackle this issue here. So before we get into the topic today, tell me a little bit more about yourself and your experience.
So I come from a governmental experience. I spent over 25 years with the U.S. Secret Service conducting threat assessments and financial fraud investigations on a domestic, but also, a global scale. And oftentimes with the Secret Service, we were working with different types of experts, in technical fields, whether it was physical security, information security, cybersecurity, to help plan events and hopefully prevent issues, but oftentimes to solve problems. But a big part of what we did was always incident response, right? What happens when something goes wrong? And, what I did in the government is really very similar to what I'm doing today. From this stage of my career, and I've been in professional services for almost 5 years, we're hoping to provide the same type of solutions, and methodology that we would at working for the government to many businesses, especially those businesses in the mid-market. We feel are very underserved. And to your point, it's a very confusing, topic to work in because we look at data privacy and information security as really two separate fields that are converged in a number of particular areas. You need to understand how to protect privacy from a legal way, but also from a very technical way. And then, of course, looking at the parts of this which are based on incident response, legal areas, insurance, which I know you're very familiar with, and the physical security. So, we kind of converge those areas together, and we look at it as a very holistic approach. Incidentally, we do conduct a number of internal investigations, and I have to tell you, between physical security, the information security, and the investigations that we do work, there's another convergence there. Every piece of evidence is, for the most part, is digital in some way, shape, or form. And, our lives just don't exist anymore without having some sort of a digital footprint. So, we've kind of gone from my career where we began with investigating cases of, counterfeit currency and treasury checks to credit cards to digital payment systems. It's been quite an evolution over I hate to say, 30 years since I've been doing this, that we are where we are right now, which is a very interesting, complicated, and challenging environment for every business.
No, I would completely agree. And there is one thing that I would like you to touch on a little bit more. Obviously, most of the audience isn't going to have 25 years of Secret Service experience. And you had the pleasure of inviting me to a Secret Service event here in the Northeast and how they're integrating with the business community. Do you mind just touching a little bit on what that looks like and specifically how the Secret Service, I know you're not directly involved with them anymore, but how that relationship with the business community is evolving?
Right. As you've said before, this is really an area that it's a shared responsibility, and no one entity or organization can kind of do it on their own. That public-private partnership really is alive and kicking with the service. And, it's built on trust and having conversations and sharing, methodologies and sharing information that will help businesses be proactive and, talk to them about ways that should something occur, that they can respond. Businesses can respond to those types of incidents. And the service is going to be, they're investigators, right? So an investigator will go in, assess the situation, obtain evidence, and then build a case. And oftentimes, where I felt that law enforcement is not able to help really is in kind of the remediation, and that's where I kind of saw an opportunity for myself and for Porzio Compliance Services to kind of be that trusted advisor to help businesses, and bring in experts to mitigate risk, because that's not really what the government does. But what the government can do is have different types of seminars and educate business owners about risks and educate them so that they can be better prepared and understand kind of what some of the vulnerabilities and threats are out there.
No, that's great. And I think them reaching out to the business community and putting on those seminars, the more and more individuals that can get involved with that and understand where they're coming from and their role in this whole ecosystem is gonna benefit everybody. And I hope they continue to do that, and you hope you continue to be the liaison between that organization and the business community here in the Northeast. So with all that being said, let's jump into your topic of today. We're going to be discussing the challenges and opportunities in combating cybercrime from inside and outside your organization. And I know there's a bunch, almost 6 challenges here that you want to talk about in relation to organizational inability to get things done. So if you don't mind, let's jump into some of those challenges.
Yeah, it's actually interesting. When I made this list, I came up with 6 challenges and 2 opportunities. So I hope that this isn't going to be doom and gloom, but I do think that on balance, one of the things that I really would like businesses and organizations to know is that just how much of a challenge it is for every organization, from a small business to an enterprise-sized business, to really be able to combat, these types of threats to them. But they're completely overmatched, because on the other side of the wire, if you will, are going to be criminal hackers whose job it is to compromise your system. And your job as a business owner or organization is to produce some sort of a product or a service, and that's where your focus is. So you're at an immediate disadvantage because you're not looking at defense, and you're just hoping that your information technology systems are going to be able to help you do what you need to do. So I think one of the first ones of challenges that I see are really understanding that your digital assets are your currency, or that they are the lifeblood for every business process. And I think once we understand that, it'll give the proper weight and attention that business owners and organizations need to give to those assets. I think the second one that I have here is recognizing that there is a changing landscape of risk, and again, that they are outmatched. That every business is outmatched. The J.P. Morgan Chases and whatnot. They put hundreds of millions of dollars into information security, and there are times that even that they are compromised. So we have to consider that as well. I also think that we need to look at the value in investing in IT and spending, in a very proactive approach. It's always cheaper to upgrade your information technology than it is to have to remediate the costs for incidents. And that's both on the information technology and security side. It's offense and defense. And I think you have to look at the costs to be more offensive and defensive versus the impact that these types of events will have to your business. There's lots of studies out there about how much a piece of data costs, or what the cost of a disruption is. I think we've all struggled kind of with this, is trying to get businesses to be more motivated. But I think I actually found the solution to this one, Anthony, and it is ask a business owner what it would cost to be out of business for a day. Then multiply that by being out of business because of an interruption, because of a cyber crime, for a week or 10 days. I think that's when the dollars start to add up. I think that is a reality that most business owners can understand. So I think we need to look at the business impact analysis. I think we also need to really understand this. I guess this is where the opportunities come into play. That every step that they take, everything that they do will make them better. It's going to take a while, but they want to get better, right? And, it's just not a set it and forget it type of process. Security is an ongoing iterative process of evaluating and adapting to new technologies, which actually give you some opportunities to be more productive. But with those come threats and of course, the exploitation of vulnerabilities that we all know about. So, and I think really for business owners too, you can't be good at everything, right? You've got to be good at, do what you're best at. And you have to understand that if you can get somebody to manage your IT assets, whether it's from sources internal or external to your business, that's where you should kind of focus your assets and I think, really your effort, because there's definitely you have to change your IT person from from this break fix mentality to more of a strategic management of your outsourced providers to manage your environment. Some other opportunities I think are, better resilience starts with taking these first steps and asking questions. Businesses need to ask these questions, they don't know. And again, I think every step that you take to protect your environment, physical environment, digital environment, whatever you do is going to make you better. But at the end of the day, you've got to really create a culture of security awareness. And by taking those first steps to do so, I think that businesses are going to get better, but you have to start down their path. Every journey starts with this first step. And I think that's exactly where a lot of businesses need to go from here. I know it's a whole lot to digest, but it's just some of my thoughts on the opportunities and the challenges that are out there.
Yeah, no, and those are really good points. And I have a couple of follow-up questions that I believe are unique to your experience. So I want to dig into these a little bit further to help people understand them more. So obviously in your role, you are responding. You are that incident response team. You are getting those first calls. What does that typically look like? Because I think a lot of organizations, leaders, it hasn't happened yet to them. So until it hits them personally or it affects somebody that's close to them, they don't really even understand what that looks like. So for the incidents that you've been responded to or you've gotten that first phone call from, what does that typically look like? What is it? Chaos? Is it organized? What does that look like?
Organized chaos. So what it typically looks like is it's really with businesses that have these types of issues, I think, are completely out of their element, right? Any type of rational business decision making based upon what you know and what your experience has been really is not applicable here. Because, let's just take a ransomware attack, for instance. It really reveals to you a lot of the weaknesses in your information technology and security environment. And it's going to test your backups. It's going to test your internal and external technology providers. And you may find that there were things that were not being done that you thought were being done, like having access to your backups. But then there's going to be situations where your backups are not available. And then you're going to try to figure out if you have insurance or not. So it's almost as if you're doing a kind of a check from A to Z on things that you should have been looking at before you had a problem. So that makes it very, very difficult for businesses. And oftentimes they find out that they didn't have the proper insurance, they didn't have the proper backups, and they don't have another way to reconstitute their business process. And they realize that this is something they should have been doing all along. So it's a very, I think you've seen that TV show. What is it? Naked and Afraid. Very much what it's like. I have to tell you. And what we try to do is we try to help business owners, cover themselves in some way, shape, or form and get out of the cold. And what we really do is we kind of act as that breach coach, right? We'll walk across the hall. I'll get one of our attorneys. And then we'll engage the client, and then we'll start working the problem. We'll start engaging firms that may be able to help, determine if they can get their backups. And if they can't get their backups, what's the next step? And I kind of have a decision tree that I've built along these lines that helps me in these crisis situations kind of work the problem or the process, because business owners are often don't know where to start. And they're very confused and they're very upset. And we try to work them through a process in a very methodical way, bring in people that we need internally and externally to get them to the point where they can make a decision about about what to do next. And it's a very stressful situation, and it usually takes a lot of our time up. Usually I have to put everything else to the side to work these types of problems.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I could see them wanting some sort of stability in that time of chaos, and you guys could act as that and at least give them some sort of, we have the individuals, we have the people, we have the organizations that can help respond in this matter. Let us lead you down the path to success, whatever success looks like here. I have two follow-up questions. The first one has to do with a statement around the digital assets are the new currency and the lifeblood for every business. What do you see as the typical digital assets that hackers or cyber criminals are going after nowadays?
There was a time where there was a time where personally identifiable information, credit card information, was very highly valued. And I think the market has been so flooded with data. One of our colleagues, lifers, who I think you may know, Andre Crahill, says that, that the Americans are digitally naked, right? And I think a lot of our information has already been stolen, hacked, right? So what I'm seeing right now is that information as part of your business process is being held ransom, right? That's critical because there may be businesses with only 100 or 200 employees or 15 employees, but because what they do is profitable, and the digital asset information that they use just in a way to receive payments, to receive goods and resources, anything in their enterprise resource management system is at risk. That's their secret sauce. Deliveries, sales, client lists, whatever they need to produce whatever it is that they produce and deliver to clients. That is really, to me, has become very important. And that's the new critical asset, a shift away from data as it is to PII, PHI, but really more focus on, the business process. So I think what we see is credential harvesting and those types of breaches are then leveraged against organizations who do spear phishing attacks and what have you. Business email compromise is another big one. So that information is valuable, but it's valuable to leverage another attack to do something else, which has really, really become very, very interesting.
Yeah, definitely. I think they're using that to control your business and control what you can and cannot do going forward. And like you said, what's most valuable to businesses is that they can be operational, and every day that ticks by that they can't, it just makes them more and more vulnerable to do what they want them to do. So the final question I have around these challenges and opportunities is your specific role with the Secret Service and how I believe physical security in the cybersecurity space is very rarely ever talked about, and I think it's a big disservice. So I want you to touch a little bit on what does physical security in the data privacy cybersecurity space actually look like, so people can understand that and how that is a vital part of the overall cybersecurity posture of an organization.
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And I really think it leads to a culture of security awareness. The example that I like to use is, last time you were at a bank and you sat down with a customer service representative, if you look at their desk, there's nothing on it that's personal. There's no paper on it. It's clean, right? So I think it starts with information as a physical asset, right? And starts with paper, and it starts with these boxes that we have on our desks and servers and everything that retains digital information, right? Those can be easily compromised as well. And in a physical sense, it's the people that come in and do your cleaning. It's who has access to your these types of your office. It's your vendor, it's your visitor management. Right? How do you handle visitors? And how do you know when people are in your organization that need to be there? So I think really information security starts at your front door and how you are able to secure physical information and the information systems that have digital information. And it really comes down to business processes, internal controls, and procedures. And most businesses are very, very weak in this area. You don't have to turn your office into Fort Knox, but you should know who your employees are. You should have policies like clean desk policies, and you should shred information, and you should secure information according to its particular data privacy regulation inside your offices. It's a very easy step to take. It's low-hanging fruit. It's inexpensive, but it really requires a cultural shift. And once you take that step, the next step is easy. Maybe we could even start changing passwords every once in a while, and prohibiting people to go on certain sites, and really setting that culture of security awareness. It's a process that will go forward. So I really think the physical security piece is so critical, and it's also really important, in the kinetic world where bad things happen, right? Whether it's man-made or otherwise, those things do happen. And our most critical asset, as business owners and people in business, are our people. And there are ways to do better as well there. So I think there's a lot of things that can be done. Background checks is another one that it should be done routinely, to look at if things change with folks as well, and have their motives. So but this is the tip of the iceberg. This is the starting point where I think businesses need to begin, because there's a lot of things that can happen that are adverse to business continuity.
Yeah, and that's, if anybody gets anything out of this episode, there's a free advice right there. They should go back and re-listen to that exactly, because you could literally start improving the cybersecurity posture of your organization from the physical security aspect today, with nobody needing to help you. So thank you so much for providing some insights there. On how that actually works. Now, those are great challenges, opportunities in this space. I would be doing our audience a disservice if I didn't ask about something else that you guys have going on at Porzio Compliance Services that I know about, which is a topic that I hate that we even need to talk about, but we do, which is the school safety program. So I know we weren't planning for this, but I think it's important for individuals in our territory here in the Northeast to understand what Porzio's doing in this area and what that means to the townships and everybody involved in that space. So if you could touch briefly on that, I'd appreciate it.
Well, thank you. That's it. I'm glad you spoke about that and are asking that question. And our approach is actually convergent with physical and information security. What we're doing on multiple engagements is we're providing, we're mapping. And I know our audience may not understand this very well, but when we talk about information security and data privacy, we're always looking for regulations and frameworks like NIST and ISO to map to, right? Well, New Jersey has been pretty prescriptive in its approach to school safety for public schools and to a certain extent private schools. But we have minimum standards and recommendations that came out of New Jersey Office of Homeland Security and Preparedness and the Department of Education, which we look at, our work with schools. We've created an assessment to basically map, our work to these standards. So, and this provides us a really great opportunity for gap analysis and for assessment, and compliance. And then again, on the information security side, we're doing the same thing. We're helping schools, doing vulnerability assessments, looking at policies and procedures. So on the physical side, you can walk around, look at doors, you can see drills, you can, we do drill observations, we can go over incident response plans. And on the information security side, it's a little bit different because you actually need to run a tool across an environment, kind of see where the holes are. But again, it comes down to policies and it comes down to incident response planning. So it's it's quite a parallel approach, and we often do them at the same time. But, school safety, and I've been a security professional for a very long time, is its own animal, right? Because you've got these open environments. Schools are created to be open, right? Public can come in, people can get in and out. And now we're trying to we have this old infrastructure, if you will, and we're trying to retrofit it with a security solution. It's very challenging, and I think schools are doing a great job. But again, there's always room for improvement. And you think information technology spend is expensive. Physical security sometimes changes to environments can be expensive. But in either case, there's always low-hanging fruit, ways to get better. So we've got assembled a fantastic team. I think they're, I don't think there's any better team, that does this in the state. We've got a former commissioner of education, Dave Hespy. Kevin Craig is a school safety and security expert in the state of New Jersey himself. He's head of school safety for a municipality as well. We also look at special needs students and how we incorporate them into our plan. Liz Shea, a former assistant commissioner for students with disabilities, is with us as well. So, we've got this real holistic approach, and it's very exciting, and it's necessary, and we're very involved in that. And I appreciate you asking us about that, because we're very excited about the work that we can do in that area.
Yeah, no, and I appreciate it, because with a 4-year-old and a 1-year-old, this stuff is on your mind, and you're starting to see questions about this stuff on ballots, and I'm glad you guys are the tip of the spear in this space here in New Jersey, because it's definitely something that I want to be making sure that it's getting done with kids getting ready to go into public school. So I appreciate the work you guys are doing there. All right, let's jump over to a more a personal note. Let's get to know Jim Mottola a little bit more, like our conversations back in the day. I'd like to ask you, obviously, you mentioned before 30 years now of a career, 25 spanned in the Secret Service. If there was an individual recently graduated from college or 25 years old, what type of advice would you give them looking back now to follow a similar career path or a path that you've taken yourself?
Wow, that's a tough one. I think hindsight is 20/20, and I don't really kind of delve into the what ifs and should haves, but I do see opportunities for young men and young women right now that jump into the data privacy and cybersecurity world. There are so many opportunities, and as you know, there is just a lack of talent out there. And I think that this field is going to continue to be an opportunity for them, and they should just dig in and find their niche area and just go for it. I think a real interesting, I think, critical opportunity is the ability to understand technology and to also explain it and talk about it, right? Somebody's got to be, if you will, I'll go with the man in the middle, but somebody has to be the person in the middle between the technology and the business that uses technology. And you've got to be able to speak cyber and business. And there's a lot of opportunities out there to do this. I think, organizations, businesses like yours are able to do that. We try to do that, but that's what I would say. Find that niche in this area and just double down, get in there, get your certifications, get some good experience. You can get experience with the government to do this, and then you can bring it up in the private sector, where you can find private sector businesses that are willing to train you and get you up to speed. So that's my 2 cents right now.
Absolutely love it. There we go. So I am an avid reader, James, and I would love to know the book or books that you have given most often as gift or that have impacted the way you live your everyday life.
That's pretty philosophical, Anthony, I have to say. I will.
It's another part of my brain.
So for me, I teach organizational. I teach. Yeah, I'm an adjunct professor, and I taught organizational behavior. And I really am a big, I like to study businesses and organizations. And every day I get to walk into a new business and look at it from an organizational perspective, right? So for me, culture is important, right? And for me, it all starts with, Simon Sinek and that start with why, right? I think behind every organization, entrepreneur, that question has to be asked. And I think for successful businesses, it has to be answered. And the way we approach things, and I really do like Simon Sinek a lot. When I teach, I use a lot of his TED Talks because it talks a lot about millennials and Generation X and baby boomers and how we all work together and how we treat each other. And I'm a big Simon Sinek fan. And it's a short book. So that's a good read. I'll probably run through the typical graduate school trio, if you will, of books. Malcolm Gladwell, The Tipping Point. I really, there's a lot of things that bring to mind to me as somebody who's in business, what it takes to get to the next step and how things happen. I think, Coleman's Emotional Intelligence the first half is a great, the second half of the book I didn't find very helpful, but the first half of the book, I think it's really important that, we talked about before that emotional intelligence, that technology, information security knowledge, the technical knowledge is important, but you have to be able to read people and understand people. I have always liked, Covey, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. For me, it's always begin with the end in mind. So those are books. And then this little known book by Mark Cuban, which is it's a kind of a spin-off of some of his blogs, How to Win in the Sport of Business. It's probably about 40 pages, but it hits a lot of key takeaways. So those are the books that I generally will give away. I mean, I'm a big fan of biographies. I look at biographies by entrepreneurs, by jazz artists. I think people's stories are very interesting. How they got where they are, the things that they had to overcome. So those are the types of things that I like to read. And generally, I find myself, it'll take me about a year or two to read a book. Right? You're going to laugh at that. But I read about 5 books at a time. So I'll put it down. I'll come back to it a month later. Then I'll read another chapter, and another chapter, and another chapter. I kind of stretch it out. There's no binge reading. I kind of stretch it out like TV shows used to be. You get one a week if you're lucky, and only 24 or 30 in a season. That's the way I do it, and then I'll come back to something. And right now I'm reading a book called Dinner with DiMaggio, which is a great book. About someone that he befriended, actually his foot doctor, and talks about Joe DiMaggio, and it's a great read for a Yankee fan or for anybody who likes the 50s, 60s, and 70s. He's a very interesting guy. So
awesome. Good stuff. That definitely gives our listeners here and our audience a couple of books that if they haven't touched on yet, they should definitely dive into. I love to start with why. We just had the Middlesex County organization in here yesterday, and their entire approach to their rebranding was that exact concept, which was really good. And then touching on the emotional intelligence as well, I think you're seeing more and more. This is such a huge part in somebody's career and them individually getting better and being able to understand emotional intelligence and how to communicate with humans. So that's good stuff. I'd like to go over to what organization, what charitable organization, what nonprofit do you or the company support, and if you could tell us a little bit about that, so our audience, if they find it's a fit, could go out and support that organization as well.
So that's terrific. I really appreciate that as well. So I've been involved with the Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation for about 11 or 12 years now. And we have put on a golf tournament for that foundation in Middlesex County for about that long. And the foundation is really interesting in the fact that it gives away almost, I think, in excess of 90% of every dollar it takes in. So their operational fees are very, very low. They keep costs down. I think they have maybe two full-time employees. So it's an amazing organization. And what it does is it provides scholarships, educational scholarships to fallen, surviving children of fallen Marines and federal law enforcement officers throughout the country. So, typically what will happen is an officer will die or pass away while they're serving, and they've got children, and it'll provide scholarships in the form of a bond to those surviving spouse and children for their education. So, great organization, Marine Corps Law Enforcement Foundation, and that's the one that I spend quite a bit of time working with and raising money for and supporting.
That's awesome. Now, real quick on that, where can people find out more about them? Do you have their website address handy by any chance?
mclef.org, mclef.org.
All right, great. And the final question, obviously this is a podcast for business leaders, innovators in the Northeast. Who is somebody on your radar that our audience should be aware of that's really changing the game, and we should be looking out for them or going to find out more about what they're doing in the Northeast here to help, whether it's businesses or charities or whatnot? Who would you recommend our audience go learn a little bit more about?
Within technology, first of all, I have to say that it's just so interesting for me to meet, business entrepreneurs and innovators who are also educators, right? That's a great combination. They've got passion, they've got business smarts, they understand the technology, and they're looking to really, further this discussion, make us more resilient, push the ball forward, what have you. And in that area, there's a few people that I like to work with and who I respect and who I think are always just one step ahead of everybody else. One of them is, of course, Rashad, your CEO. This is not, of course, I know this is the main podcast, but he is definitely, I think, one of those people. And the things that you all are doing, it's really on the education front, is pretty impressive. And of course, the business that you've built and the culture you have. So that's one. I think that a former colleague of mine, George Redis from the Secret Service, who was a cybercrime fighter, left mid-career and works for a financial institution, and himself has a terrific formed a terrific organization and has a great podcast as well. George is a fantastic guy. He's always on the edge there, and he's all about collaborative, partnering as well. And I think there are people like that out there, that you meet with, and it makes you get excited about what's going on and what the possibilities of collaboration really are, because they look at things as a win-win-win. And I think that's kind of the takeaway, is that we're all in this together. It's us against them, and we shouldn't be fighting amongst ourselves. It's collaborative. There's enough work to go around. That's for darn sure, right? And really, sometimes the biggest impediment to cybersecurity is just trying to convince organizations that they need to do something and they need to think differently. And I think that thought leadership and that ability to execute and that ability to collaborate are really going to be where I think our success, as data privacy and cybersecurity professionals, it is going to be in our ability to execute and do all those types of things together.
Yeah, I completely agree. I mean, if we're not all working together, the business community, the individuals that live in these states that we visit every single day, we're never going to get better, and we're never going to get over this. So I'm glad to hear about George. Once again, thank you for the mention of Rashad. I do agree. He's doing great work. He's really trying to give back to the community and the students all across, both from county college perspective to also also the private school perspective, and there's a lot of opportunity there to get individuals involved in this space and really make a difference. So thank you for that. This has been great, Jim. I really appreciate your time. Real quick, if people want to learn more about yourself or the company Porzio Compliance Services, where can they go?
Of course, they can go to the internet, our website at PorzioComplianceServices.com. We're also on LinkedIn and Twitter as well.
Great. And what's your social media profile of choice?
Now, my LinkedIn page goes right to my Twitter feed, and I do think that LinkedIn still provides. I think it still provides some value, right, as far as getting connected to folks in business. I still find it very valuable for what I do, and that's my primary go-to. So
great. Really appreciate it, Jim. Thank you so much for coming on, and I'm excited for this to go live and see everybody's response to it. Thank you so much for your time.
You got it. Anytime, Anthony. Always a pleasure.
To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. This guarantees that every episode will get delivered directly to your device. To help us get the word out, share with a friend, leave a review, and check out our discussions on the web at go-domain.com/podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.